Hey everyone, Christian here, and I want to do a video. I thought it was best done in the car. Let me adjust. There we go. Looks okay. Best done in the car traveling around. This is going to be a video about how cold hardy coconuts are and how to tell if coconuts are cold hardy to your area. So, there was a discussion about 5 or 6 days ago on a palm forum on Facebook. I think it was people who love palm trees and exotic plants, which is a great forum to be on, if you, especially if you like cold hardy palms. And talking about where I should try and overwinter coconuts, and people were asking questions about, will coconuts grow in Savannah? Will coconuts grow in South Georgia or North Florida or Central Florida, or where in Florida? So this is going to mostly pertain to plants that are in the southeast U.S. However, I will try and touch on other areas of the world where coconuts grow that I can kind of tell you more about. So when it comes to cold, there's two aspects to the cold hardiness of coconuts. One is the absolute temperatures that it can take, and one is that the cool temperatures that it can take for over a period of time. So we'll start with the absolute ones, because absolute temperatures, because it's a little bit more straightforward, for lack of a better term. When you have a cold snap of 28 Fahrenheit, that's going to be kind of like the edge at which coconuts can kind of handle without taking severe damage, and only for short periods of time. So I wanted to kind of get some coconuts in the view here. As you can see, there's a lot of on this block alone. And I don't remember the last time it was probably 28 degrees here was, I don't know, 1997. It didn't hit 28 here in 2010, 2011. But what is important is that during the day after that cold snap, if it jumps up into the 60s or 70s, that is key to. Let me turn down a side road here. It is key to the coconut surviving that cold snap. So if you have a low of 28 and it jumps to 70 later that day, then your coconut's probably okay. However, if you have a low of 28 and the high is 42, and it happens more than one day, you're most likely coconut's probably dead. So that rebound is very important when it comes to coconuts. So coconuts that are actually grown in the interior of Florida that will hit 28 and jump up actually have a better chance of living than, say, ones that live along the coast and it hits 28 and may get to like 50 that day. That's really that's really important to the life of the coconut. So now coconuts have more problems with cool weather, I think, than the cold weather, because it's kind of more of an abstract thing where you have to determine how much time basically below 60 degrees you have the coconut will essentially go from growing, or below 70 it kind of stops growing, and below 60 or so they'll actually start going to sort of a survival mode, especially if it's cold and windy and dry. I'm sorry, it's windy and dry. Obviously it's a little bit chilly for a coconut. It looks like I'm in the middle of some sort of event that's going on here. Let's see. Hopefully this person. All right. So, as you know, I don't edit my videos, so that's kind of stuff will just kind of show up. And so as a result, for example, in 2010, 2011, temperatures in this area, it got down to like 35, 34, and it stayed there for like a lot of the day. A lot of the night during the day. It only got into the mid 40s for one day. It was one of the weirdest days I've ever seen in Florida. It probably was one of the weirdest weather days in Florida, period. And let's drive back. And a lot of coconuts were actually killed here. And so to say that coconuts are hardy here, I think is fine, because you'll see them germinated floating around in the canals and the river. And I think that the definition of a palm being hardy to an area is growing it can be slightly protected when younger, but as long as it grows up to a mature size and produces fruit, the fruit doesn't have to be viable. But for example, there are coconuts in Bradenton that won't really produce viable fruit, but they grow fine there. Just there isn't enough heat to produce the viable fruit a lot of the times. So that's one of the aspects that of cooler climates or milder climates. So where will coconuts grow as a result? Well, as far as like living more than 1 year, like if you were to go and try and find coconuts by driving down to Florida, you won't really find any on the west coast north of Clearwater Beach. You might find one here or there, but you really won't see any until you get there. Then when you get further south into Pinellas County, because it is sort of an anomaly where it gets a much milder influence from Tampa Bay, so it kind of acts as like an island almost. Okay, and so, but if you go over to Tampa, or just even cool, like just outside of downtown Tampa, coconuts really aren't cold hardy there at all. So further south than that, as long as you're west of 75, you're going to be okay for. There's going to be some times when there's going to be cold events where even west of 75 is going to not be safe for coconuts, and they will there's a good chance that they will die. Once you get south, once you get to Alligator Alley, you can go across. Like in the interior of the state's a little too chilly. You won't find them like in LaBelle or Arcadia. You will find them in the Immokalee and south though. So once you get really down to like Naples and you go across the state there, the coconuts are pretty hardy to that area. You even find there's even a couple growing wild along Route 29 if you ever want to take that road. So on the East Coast, it's a little bit different because the Gulf Stream moderates the weather there. So anywhere, like if you were to draw a line straight across from Cape Coral, you'd hit West Palm Beach. But West Palm Beach has a warmer climate than Cape Coral by a couple degrees. So like there's sort of like an equivalency where the climate of your of the West Coast is going to be 50 miles, the equivalent of like 50 miles north of where it is on the East Coast. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense, but essentially, if you were to go to West Palm and go 50 miles, it's kind of the same climate as what you'd find in Cape Coral. So, so for finding coconuts on the East Coast, I would say that you're not going to find any planted north of like Ponce de Leon Inlet, or is it De Leon Inlet? One of the two. It is just north of Daytona, or just south of Daytona Beach. They really shouldn't really be there, but as far as finding them in any quantity, you're going to find them south of Cape Canaveral. Now, there was a freeze in '89 that killed almost every coconut north of West Palm Beach. So that place is still kind of recovering from the idea of growing them. It hit like 19 degrees, and that's gonna basically anything below 27 is pretty much gonna kill a coconut outright if it's for any period of time, meaning like over an hour. And so if you don't see them growing in your area, it doesn't necessarily mean they won't grow there. For example, when I first moved to Venice, I didn't see any coconuts, but I saw a ton of coconuts in Punta Gorda, only 25 miles away. And there are some microclimates, and Punta Gorda does have a slight one because of the river there. But I really thought that they would grow well, and I mean, for the most part, they did. Besides that bad freeze that really hit the whole west coast of Florida and even parts of Miami. So, as far as going further north, or I'm sorry, on the East Coast, going further north, they're really only going to grow on the Barrier Island once you get north of, say, Fort Pierce, I would say. Vero Beach is really going to be more on the beach, and Melbourne and Cocoa. I don't really think any coconuts are going to do well in Cocoa, but Merritt Island is definitely a microclimate. Then in the interior of the state, you will find like large lakes that will actually provide a microclimate on the south side that will provide these climates that you can grow coconuts in near like say Lake Placid or even Avon Park or Sebring. Once you get more into Polk County, though, it really gets too chilly for that lake microclimate to kind of kick in. So I don't know if I'd try. Maybe you could try Winter Haven, something like that. Lakeland area, but it's probably going to be less successful. So, but as far as growing a coconut in other areas besides Florida, Georgia is really not going. There's one coconut growing in St. Augustine, and that is barely hanging on by a thread, as far as like a large coconut. And that's about as far north as like I would really try and take it there. Excuse me, need some water. And then so Georgia and anything South Carolina, anything north of there is going to be out of the question. As far as other states, there's going to be sorry, just got to make sure I don't follow the rules of the road here. And so I went to Brownsville, Texas about 7 years ago, and I was surprised to see there actually were a few coconuts in the area. Now they're marginal. It's kind of the edge right there, and trying to grow them north of there is really just wishful thinking. There were some there used to be coconuts in places like Tampa and Galveston, which have almost an identical climate. Galveston's a little bit cooler, but in the 50s, but they all got killed in the freeze of 57, I believe. So these recurring freezes that happen in, say, 57, 77, 89, 83, 85, 89 were brutal. 96, 2001, and then 2010, 2011. These recurring freezes tend to kill all those marginal ones, say in Galveston or in Tampa, or some that were planted in Orlando. There are a few old coconuts in Orlando, even because it has that microclimate, that microclimate that doesn't warm up the area. So Brownsville is probably a place where you could try them out if you wanted to not be in Florida and try it out. I've been to someone's house that has them, and that was after the freeze, and they were still alive. As far as California, it's not really going to be. There is no place in California where they're going to do that well. You can try them along the beach. People do try them and try and get them extra heat. You can only do so much. They're never going to fruit properly. So if you look at maps of other areas, like say Mexico further south, there are coconuts in Cabo San Lucas, which is very far south of California, the California-Mexico border. But beyond that, they really don't do that well in the rest of those Baja California states. And then if you go south from Brownsville, you really have to get down to the Tampico area to really have coconuts that are doing well. So you can see there's a nice grove of tall coconuts there. So here, it really is important to understand the reality of how cold sensitive a coconut is. Not only how cold sensitive, but how cool sensitive. That makes it harder to grow, say, indoors, because it needs that heat. So when you just bring it indoors and say it's 45 in your garage, a royal palm can handle that, but a coconut cannot handle that. And so having ample heat above 72 degrees is ideal, but anything above like 60 is really required. So it looks like I hit a double dead end here. But yeah, it is very, because back in 1996 I was in 8th grade, and I had my first two tropical plants I ever purchased were a white bird of paradise and a coconut. And I don't even remember where I got them. I want to say it was just from like a Home Depot or something. But they meant so much to me. And I bring them in, and one year they survived through the year. I didn't have any heating, just brought them into the living room of my mother's house. And the bird of paradise did fine, but the coconut was like barely hanging on. The second year, it eventually kicked the bucket. So, I want to see people try and grow them. If you have a greenhouse, by all means, grow them. I'm driving back down the same road that I came the other way here. And you can see the other plants you can see on the right-hand side, these adenidias, and there are tons of them, and they're nice and tall. If you see adenidias or Christmas growing tall, then you will see coconuts. Coconuts and adenidias are kind of have almost the exact same cold hardiness about them. Adenidias tend to be used a little more often because they're easier to kind of replace if they die. But if you can grow a Christmas palm, you can grow a coconut palm, and vice versa. So if you see those around, that's kind of like the number one flag plant that hi, guy walking his dog again. So you see that. I'm trying to think of other palms that are kind of like a flag plant that show Veitchias. So I don't know if you, probably should have pointed out, but there was a Veichia back there, a nice tall one about a minute or so ago. But I don't want to make this too long, because if people see it's like a 20-minute video, they're gonna not want to like buckle up and watch the whole thing, especially just me driving around. Unfortunately, we're back on the same street. But it's important to know that, you know, these things, and they are more cold sensitive the smaller that they are. So if you get one with some trunk on it, these tall coconuts now are hardier than, say, a seedling along the ground, one that, you know, doesn't have a trunk yet. So that's also something to take into effect. If you can buy a larger coconut and you live in a marginal area and you want to take that gamble, it's a less of a gamble the bigger the plant is. So I hope that all this information was useful to everyone that watches this vlog. If anyone wants me to do a follow-up on coconuts and wants to know where they can they can ask if they want to grow a coconut where they live, you know, leave a comment down below. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll have many more discussions regarding coconut cold hardiness, or I'm sorry, plant cold hardiness, plants in general. And yeah, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see everyone next time. I'll try and do other videos regarding cold hardiness, but you know, upon request. So until then, I'll see everyone later, and hope everyone has a good weekend.